The American dream for most immigrants from around the world is to earn riches in this country's bustling job market. But for one Afghan immigrant named Mohammed Nawabi, he saw that road to riches in America's black market and opened up a drive-thru restaurant which became the Bronx's one-stop shop for illegal guns.
Fareedullah Nawabi was born in Kabul, Afghanistan in 1970, and he would go by the name Mohammed. The details of his early life are sketchy, but in December of 1979, when he was 9 years old, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan and took control over much of Kabul. There were Muslim guerrilla groups in Afghanistan who were opposing the invading Soviet forces called the Mujahideen, which broadly refers to Muslims who fight on behalf of the Islamic faith or community. From the time the invasion began, Kabul was full of violence, bloodshed, and strife, and when Mohammed was 12, he and his family joined many other Afghans and fled to nearby Pakistan in an underground railroad.
The Mujahideen received foreign support and were strongly backed by the US, who sent them a continuous supply of heavy artillery to fight the Soviets. Many Pakistanis and Afghans living in Pakistan were sent back to Afghanistan to fight the war. When Nawabi was in his late teens, he returned to join the Mujahideen to fight the Soviet forces, and during that time he became proficient in the use of weapons. After the war ended in February of 1989, those who fought with the Mujahideen were given preferential treatment to gain entry into the US. It's alleged that some Afghans who weren't even involved with the fighting would be prepared with war stories to fake their experiences to immigration agents. Some other Afghans sought asylum with fake documents, and every year the US government granted refugee status to 2,000 Afghan refugees living in Pakistan and India. Nawabi's parents were the first to emigrate to the US, and in December of 1989, Mohammed was brought to New York City to join them. The Nawabis were granted political asylum and settled in Flushing, Queens, which would become home to the largest Afghan neighborhood in the Northeast. Mohammed later went back to Pakistan to retrieve the rest of his family, and they would all go on to gain permanent residence. Nawabi was already fluent in English, as the British rule of the Asian subcontinent led to widespread use of the language, and many people in Pakistan were well versed.
In Afghanistan, poultry farming is a vital source of the economy, and chicken farms are widespread across the country. Because of this, many Afghan immigrants found work in the poultry business in the US and opened up street stands, chicken stores, and restaurants. The ambitious young Mohammed also got involved in the chicken business, and in 1990 he opened up a restaurant in the Bronx called Mama's Fried Chicken.
The McDonald's behind me now stands where Mama's Fried Chicken was once located at 1600 Boston Road in the Claremont Village section of the Bronx. It's right next door to a church and across the street from the Herman Ritter Junior High School, centrally located in a busy area in the Bronx. At that time, the Bronx was overrun with gun violence, which may have sparked the young immigrant's entrepreneurial imagination. With his experience with weapons and now having a spot right in the middle of the Bronx, he saw the opportunity to use his store to sell more than chicken and biscuits. He was going to add guns to the menu.
Mama's opened during the height of America's crack epidemic, and gun violence and murders in the urban neighborhoods of New York City were at an all-time high. With drug crews needing to protect their operations, the streets became flooded with illegal guns. Many people capitalized off of the demand for firearms, and gun dealers were operating all over the 5 boroughs. The Bronx in particular saw an extreme rise in violence, with shootings and murders occurring on a daily basis.
At only 20 years old and an alien who just landed on new ground, Nawabi dove headfirst into New York City's underworld. Perhaps he felt a sense of gratitude towards guns and those who supplied them, since the weapons that he and his people received gave them a feeling of power and capability, and now he was in a position to supply others with them.
Nawabi began having guns legally purchased in Ohio for him to resell in the Bronx. At that time, 18% of the illegal guns in New York City came from Ohio. There was no waiting period to buy a gun there, and all a purchaser needed was a valid driver's license, and they could purchase an unlimited amount of weapons.
People could buy handguns in Ohio for $100 to $200 a piece, then resell them in New York City for more than 2 times that. The weapons had their serial numbers defaced, turning them into what's known as ghost guns, which made them impossible to trace, and Nawabi also sold ammunition. To get access to Nawabi required you to first get an introduction from a trusted source. Once that was arranged, customers could pull up to the drive-thru window, mention the right name, then make a money exchange for their weapon of choice. Guns would be placed in generic chicken boxes under wax paper and napkins, and customers would look like they were driving off with a 3-piece meal. A customer could also use this procedure via walk-in and simply walk up to the counter and purchase their choice of firearm. For those purchasing ammo, clips or loose bullets could be packed inside empty soda cups, making it look like nothing more than a drink of Pepsi.
Nawabi had a wide variety of guns in his repository. He specialized in the most popular guns on the streets, such as 9mm, 380 semi-automatics, 357 Magnums, Mac 11s, and 38 caliber revolvers, most of which were manufactured by the Lorson and High Point companies. But he didn't stop there. He was also selling cocaine and heroin. As the word of mamas spread through the streets of the Bronx, Nawabi became known as Mohammed the Chicken Man, and by the end of 1990, business was growing for the area's new arms dealer. That same year, New York City had its most homicides ever recorded. At the end of 1990, there were 2,245 murders, and several neighborhoods in the Bronx topped the city's murder rate per capita. This was a fertile environment for gun dealers to thrive, and as 1991 came around, the violence in New York City saw no signs of slowing down. The city's understaffed and overwhelmed local precincts were often so backed up that many of those capitalizing off of drug and gun sales were able to operate with little worry of arrest. Many local residents also lived in fear, feeling that asking too many questions or calling the police on someone might put themselves in danger. This was a time in New York City when something so blatantly overt and risky as a restaurant selling guns through a drive-thru window could actually manage to be in business for an extended period of time.
Nawabi lived in a room in the back of the restaurant and kept his arsenal of guns organized by type and stored in secure compartments. Mama's clientele steadily grew throughout 1991, and the store was now open 24 hours a day, with several employees assisting with operations. Located just slightly north of the South Bronx and a few blocks from the Cross Bronx Expressway, it was a convenient location for many borough residents to get to. Mama's first came to the attention of investigators in 1991 after someone who was arrested in Upper Manhattan with a gun purchased from Nawabi tipped off police.
There were numerous drug gangs in and around the Bronx who were customers of Nawabi's. It's alleged that members of the vicious Wild Cowboys crack dealing organization, who operated on Beekman Avenue in the South Bronx and were responsible for dozens of murders, were some of Nawabi's clients. The estimates of how many guns Nawabi was selling per month range from hundreds to thousands, and with the profit margins on each gun potentially being as much as 125%, he was pulling in considerable money.
Neighbors and residents said that there were always drug dealers inside the restaurant and it would be bustling at 3 a.m., and they knew something was suspicious, but they weren't quite sure what. Locals began making complaints about the restaurant, and although police were now aware that Mama's was selling more than fried chicken, Nawabi's secret protocol held together well, and investigators struggled to get an introduction to him. During this time, business was booming at Mama's Fried Chicken. Two ex-cons were periodically transporting dozens of guns from Cincinnati, Ohio to Nawabi, and they were also selling out of their apartment buildings to their own clientele. Throughout 1992, Mama's Fried Chicken was the best kept secret to many people in the Bronx looking to purchase a weapon. Every day, cars were periodically pulling up to the drive-thru window from the middle of the day well into the late evening, and almost all of the vehicles were there to purchase guns, with only a rare appearance of a customer who was actually there to buy food. Mohammed the Chicken Man was known as one of the best in the trade, an expert in weapons who could get you any kind of gun. By now, familiar faces could pull up to Mama's drive-thru, make their purchase of guns or ammo, then pull off in no time. As 1993 came around, it was business as usual for Nawabi, and his operation continued to supply many local drug gangs and dealers with guns, and heroin and cocaine sales had also picked up. By this time, it was no secret what was happening at Mama's, and local residents knew that everyone was going there to purchase guns. Police had spent the last 2 years trying to get an introduction to Nawabi, but were unsuccessful. The case was now being investigated by the Joint Firearms Task Force, which was made up of ATF agents and local police. It wasn't until the late summer of 1993 when detectives had finally gotten their break, and an undercover was introduced to Nawabi. That was when they made their first undercover buy with the purchase of 2 handguns from the drive-thru window. During the next 11 weeks, Mama's was under heavy surveillance, and undercovers purchased 59 guns, 234 rounds of ammunition, and 1 pound of cocaine, with a total of $48,000 in value. Among the guns that cops purchased from Nawabi included a powerful Calico 9mm, which can be equipped with 50 or 100 round drum magazines. For the nearly 3 months that Mama's was under surveillance, investigators said that they don't think the restaurant sold more than $50 worth of chicken.
On November 15, 1993, city police and federal agents raided Mama's, and Nawabi and other workers were arrested. They seized 64 guns, including semi-automatics, rifles, and 464 rounds of ammunition. When Nawabi was arrested, they found identification papers under 20 different names, and police were unsure of his actual identity. He also listed Mama's as his home address, but his name was attached to a home in Flushing, Queens. Nawabi was held without bail and pled not guilty. At a press conference, Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly stood over the confiscated weapons, stating, obviously, some deadly side dishes were being served in the Bronx. Nawabi was represented by attorney Paul Brenner. Brenner defended numerous high-profile criminals such as Jacques Agnant, aka Haitian Jack, a notorious underworld figure who was accused by rapper Tupac Shakur of being the mastermind behind his 1994 robbery and shooting at the Quad Studios in Manhattan. The judge presiding over Nawabi's case was Leslie Crocker Snyder. Crocker Snyder had become the go-to judge for many of New York's biggest drug gang cases of the 90s, including that of the Wild Cowboys, the Yellow Top Crew, and the Jheri Curl Gang. She was known to be harsh on criminals and hand out long sentences. Upon the advice of his attorney, Nawabi's plea was changed to guilty. However, Nawabi later tried to withdraw his guilty plea and continue with trial, but Judge Crocker Snyder denied his motion. On August 8, 1995, Fareedullah Mohammed Nawabi was found guilty of numerous counts, including criminal sale of a controlled substance in the 2nd degree, criminal sale of a firearm in the 1st degree, and several counts of criminal sale of a firearm in the 3rd degree. He was sentenced to 5 years to life for the drug sale charge, 5 to 15 years for the 1st-degree firearm charge, and 7 consecutive terms of 1 to 3 years for the 3rd-degree firearm charges.
Nawabi's time came out to a 17-year prison sentence.
He served a large portion of his time at the Greenhaven Correctional Facility in upstate New York. Nawabi filed several appeals in the years after his conviction, all of which were denied. During his incarceration, he was heavily involved with Greenhaven's Muslim community before being transferred to other prisons.
Records from the Arthur Kill Correctional Facility in Staten Island in 2009 show that an investigation revealed that Nawabi had conspired with other inmates to gain a leadership role of the facility's Muslim community. After a hearing, Nawabi was found guilty of, among other things, violating the prison's disciplinary rules. The punishment for such violations would typically be a loss of privileges, temporary confinement, or additional duties for Nawabi. After 2009, Nawabi's trail goes cold and there's no available information on him. The Arthur Kill Correctional Facility was shut down in 2011 and the inmates were transferred to other facilities to serve their terms. Judging by his original sentence, Nawabi should have been released from prison around 2012, and the lack of any available information on him since then makes it appear likely that his permanent resident status was revoked and he was deported. The story of a chicken restaurant openly selling guns in the Bronx can serve as a symbol for the nearly free-for-all nature of the early 90s crack era in New York City. Perhaps it was the right time and place for such an operation to be ran by a less conspicuous, recent emigre soldier of war, rather than a seasoned veteran of the city streets. Yet in a twist of irony, America's access to guns helped Afghans like Mohammed Nawabi gain their freedom from the Soviet Union and get the chance to succeed in the United States. Yet when Nawabi saw his ticket to success through that very same availability of guns, his freedom was taken away.